Welcome to another episode of the Omnibus Podcast, Minnesota's best source for political news inside and outside the Capitol. I'm your host, Jeremy Munson, former state representative from southern Minnesota, and my guest this honor is Dr. John Howe, who is a Republican candidate for State Senate in Senate District 6 in the special election, where the Republican primary is April 15th, just 2 weeks away. So Dr. John Howe, welcome to the show. I'm anxious, as my listeners are, to get to know you, who you are, and of course, the big question, why are you running?
Well, thanks for having me. I think that I offer a unique set of experiences and skills being a veterinarian for many decades and serving on the Legislative Advisory Committee for the Minnesota Veterinary Medical Association. I have strong ties with animal agriculture, with disease prevention and control, and public health. Veterinarians are actually the ones that deal more in public health than MDs do. And so that offers insight, much needed insight, I think, into ramifications of, especially of certain legislation. So we have insight into that others might not.
Okay. So have you worked with legislators in previous years on legislation, or have you been down to the Capitol to testify in the Agriculture Committee when issues like bird flu or chronic wasting disease have been debated?
Yes, I have many times. And also nationally, I was president of the American Veterinary Medical Association. So I frequently spoke with congressmen about issues that face this area.
Okay. So are you retired now, or are you still practicing medicine?
Yeah, I'm retired, kind of, but we just had one of my associates at my old practice was on maternity leave for 3 months. So I filled in and finally finished that out. She's back.
Okay. So where are you on the main issues for that draw a lot of Republican voters out? Where are you on gun rights, on stand your ground legislation or constitutional carry, these things that you would support? And we'll start with that. Where are you on the Second Amendment?
So I don't think there's anyone that's going to be stronger on the Second Amendment probably than I am. I'm a life endowment member of the NRA. I'm a previous chair of several Friends of NRA banquets. And I'm a life member of the Second Amendment Foundation, and I'm also a member of the Gun Owners Caucus of Minnesota. So I'm very strong on Second Amendment, gun rights, and
okay.
Enough said.
And do you have your permit to carry?
I have a permit to carry. I'm also an instructor for the permit to carry. I'm a range safety officer, and I hold 3 NRA certification titles for teaching.
Okay. So you've been following the fight around stand your ground and the Democrats kind of push back on people's right to defend themselves and now this expanded duty to retreat. Do you want to say a few words about this and where you would stand at the Capitol and how you would advocate for gun owners?
I think it's shameful that didn't pass, the Castle Doctrine. I think it's ridiculous that when someone breaks into your own home, armed and dangerous, that you have to seek shelter in your own home. It's not right.
Okay. What other issues are important to you that you would advocate for in St. Paul, maybe on healthcare or on taxes or economic policies, or some really in the weeds legislation that you'd like to work on?
Well, there's several issues right now in the Senate Ag Committee. Veterinarians typically deal with so many of those issues, everything from fairground issues to raw milk issues. Raw milk, they're trying to get that passed again in Minnesota to sell raw unpasteurized milk. And there's a lot of diseases, unfortunately, that get transmitted through raw milk. One of my good friends for 30 some years was the previous state public health veterinarian. And so she dealt with all the zoonotic diseases that are transmissible from animals to humans. So everything from E. coli infections from petting animals at the fair to monkeypox. I mean, the list is endless. And those are important issues. And raw milk, that should never pass. It's too dangerous. I know people have a lot of feelings thinking that there's somehow more nutrients or something they can get to help, but it's very dangerous to pass. California sells raw milk. Very few states sell raw milk. That's just one issue. I mean, there's a myriad. There's 20 some bills in the Senate Ag Committee right now that I think I have expertise on.
Okay. On raw milk, because I'm actually a supporter of people being able to buy something as long as they know that it's unpasteurized and assuming the risk there, because I've witnessed so much, government crackdowns on farmers because of people selling raw milk. I mean, it's legal to sell raw milk in Minnesota as long as you do so off your farm. The legislation that's trying to be passed is allow them to sell it at farmers markets off the farm. Um, you don't think that just having a disclosure and someone willing to accept the risk is enough? I don't think that there's been any significant food increase in foodborne illness because of raw milk being sold in other states.
There has been an increase in illness from selling raw milk. I think, it's good to have the disclosure statement that you assume your own risks. But unfortunately, most people don't have the knowledge to understand what all those risks are, especially with children. There's diseases called listeriosis can be transmitted in the milk. That can be permanently crippling or lethal. That's just one of many that can be transmitted. Um, Same in goat milk and that type of thing, goat and cheeses. There's a reason why things are pasteurized um, and looked at, and these are done by federal regulators. So I guess, I mean, if it comes down to full disclosure and people make their own choice, I'm for that in so many other aspects. It's just that I've dealt with raw milk issues, for a long time, and I've seen some of the devastating illnesses that have come from that.
Okay. Well, I look forward to having conversations with you about this on a different day. On the election, of course, a lot of Republicans are going to be motivated by supporting a candidate who is strongly pro-life. You have a history of supporting life in your campaigns. I think you ran for state house before. Were you endorsed by any pro-life groups, or have you filled out the survey for pro-life groups for this
Yes,
election?
yes, and I was endorsed back in. Actually, my wife volunteers for the New Beginnings Pregnancy Center. It's in Grand Rapids and Deer River. They just had a volunteer awards banquet last night at their at their meeting. Um, yeah, I was on a television interview back in '88 or '90. I ran for District 3B, which was like Rapids all the way to Keewatin, heavily Democrat. And when asked about abortion, what I thought, I just came right out and said, I think abortion is murder. So, yeah, I was very strong pro life.
Yeah. Having owned your own business for your career here in Grand Rapids area, what have you what kind of small business issues would you be advocating for at the Capitol?
That's almost too numerous to mention, but mandates. Mandates are a big one. There are so many mandates and government overreach right now that affect not only small business, but large business. They affect all our lives. We're losing our freedoms. Public schools are going broke. They're having to lay off teachers. Um, a big mandate that one of my big issues is electrical power. So we have Minnesota Power here. There's Lake Country Power. And what's happening is the legislature, I think, very ill advisedly mandated, that in 2030, 80% of the power generation needs to be carbon free. That's not doable. There is no technology to be able to do that right now. And they wanted 100% carbon free by 2040. And so carbon free energy generation is from solar, wind, nuclear. It'd be nice if we could get nuclear in to cover a lot of that. But solar and wind in Minnesota doesn't work. It doesn't work well enough. And I've talked to I have a lot of friends and relatives that are in the electrical engineering field. And they tell me it's impossible to do. So what's going to happen is residents in Minnesota are going to have to get used to, and that could come up real quick by 2030, 5 years. They're going to have to get used to like 30% blackouts, 30% of the electricity they need. They may have to turn it off for 2/3 of a day. The power generation isn't there. And unfortunately, when we close all the coal fired plants, Clay Boswell and Cohasset and some of those, you can't just flip a switch to turn that back on. You're not going to be able to get that. So the legislature and the public needs to really understand the ramifications of what they did by making those mandates. It's just not feasible.
Yeah, and I served on the energy committee for I think 3 or 4 years in the legislature. And what fascinated me about the energy policy was digging into the supply chains of all energy sources. You can't just look at a hydroelectric dam and say it's 100% clean and carbon free, because there's a lot of carbon that goes into constructing a dam and maintaining it. Not a lot, but some.
Yeah.
And each supply chain has its own carbon footprint, if you will. Solar and wind, while installed, generate significant amounts of carbon free energy. The supply chain to mine, process, manufacture, distribute, and maintain solar and wind is actually significant. And so it's net not a carbon decrease. It's actually probably generates more carbon than it offsets. And so I think it's really important to look at the entire supply chain of each energy source, whether it's natural gas and how it's pumped out of the ground or mined, for coal and such. That would be a really good comparison. And what I also thought was interesting was the government's push towards electric vehicles, and in these mandates that auto dealers have to sell a certain percentage of electric vehicles. When we're pushing and subsidizing electric vehicles, and 65% of the 1,200-pound battery pack in my Tesla is nickel, and the greatest source in the world for nickel right now is in the North Shore of Minnesota. Yet we prohibit mines from mining it. Instead, we go to Indonesia, where we're permanently destroying the environment because of the way that they mine there, or using child slave labor in different parts of the world. You would be representing a serious mining district in Minnesota. Where do you see mining going? And do you support mining in Minnesota? And if so, with what restrictions?
I greatly support mining in Minnesota. I think we have all these valuable resources here that we can be using instead of child labor in Africa and China getting all the things that we need. We can be independent of them and get everything we need here. Not only mining, but logging and forestry. We know how to do it well. We do it better than anybody else. And we need to really support mining and logging. The 600 miners that lost their jobs, they might not be in District 6, but they're just outside of it. In fact, a lot of them live in Grand Rapids that work in those mines. And so it affects a lot of ancillary businesses. So it's a big hit when we lose mining jobs.
Yeah. Minnesota also has a lot of state-owned land in northern Minnesota. When I door knocked and I ran into teachers who like to use the words that, no, we need to fully fund education, whatever that means, an endless pit of money that you can throw your tax dollars into. I remind them that, back 100 years ago or more, we had these, one-room schoolhouses sitting on each township in Minnesota. And as rural Minnesota developed, these one-room schoolhouses kind of went away, and these independent schools consolidated. But the the section of land that those township that the schoolhouse sat on, which is 1 square mile or 640 acres, that was school trust land, and that was either sold and exchanged. Most of it over time in southern Minnesota was sold and exchanged for valuable timber and mining land in northern Minnesota. So the school trust land has millions of acres of mining and timberland in northern Minnesota. That was entrusted to the DNR to manage for the benefit of the schools. But for the most part, with an occasional timber lease, they don't do a lot with that land to support our schools. It's sitting there kind of locked down. They could be logging, I think, 40,000 acres every year, for 40 years to get back to it. Or maybe it's, 40,000. They could do a lot of logging for the benefit of the schools and for our economy and for jobs, but they choose not to. But certainly mining, if we could open up mining in northern Minnesota, especially for nickel and copper, that would be a huge benefit. So there's also a lot of people in northern Minnesota that don't think we should be mining at all. Where do you land in there? I mean, do you support copper nickel mining in northern Minnesota or not?
Yes, I do. Strongly.
Okay. All right. I mean, I believe that if we can't mine here safely, we shouldn't be mining in third world countries where they don't have the same environmental standards we do. And then we certainly shouldn't be mandating electric cars or subsidizing it. So is that something that you'd also agree with?
Totally.
Yeah. So tell us about the campaign. You've got less than 2 weeks until the primary. It's a deep red district. So whoever wins this primary, the Republican primary, is going to be our next senator from Senate District 6. What's your strategy? Are you out door knocking? Are you hosting events or coffee sessions, or what's your plan?
Yeah, we have people out door knocking. We are sending out. We sent out mailers. Um, it's really going to be a digital campaign. There's not enough time or money to get signs out, and so at least unless I win the primary. But at this point, it's digital. It's meetings, podcasts like yours, and others to get the word out, so people have a choice. And I live in the northern part of the district. I realize the senator has to represent the whole district, but with both of our current legislators in the Baxter Brainerd area and all the other candidates in that area, I feel I could offer a strong voice to represent the northern part of this district as well as the southern part. But we can all work together because it's very difficult to know everything of importance going on in the whole district. So I think working together would be very beneficial.
Yeah, it is a very large district. And I grew up in the Brainerd Lakes area, and I think the issues in the southern part of your district might be a little different than the issues in the northern part of the district. But one thing I've learned about special elections, and I ran for Minnesota House. My first election was in a special, very much like the one that you're in now, where it was just a few weeks before the primary. We only had 2 people running in my race. You have 5 people that have filed for your seat? Is that how many are in it?
Yes.
Yeah. So with 5 people running, you could win the election on April 15th with 25% of the vote. And with so many candidates dividing the vote in the southern part of the district, if you're a veterinarian, you've had thousands of families that have seen you over the years. A lot of people in the area, and it's very possible that you could mop up votes in the northern half of the district to win this primary with just 25% of the vote. It is a plurality that wins, and not you don't have to have a majority to win the primary.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for, but we'll have to see. One thing that really affects us all, though, is tourism. The 6th district, we depend a lot on tourism, so we really need to support that and to watch out for adverse legislation in all those areas. And that's the key. I think being on that legislative advisory committee, I was on that for several decades for the Minnesota, and I'm still on that. And then also I was on the same type of thing for nationally for the American Veterinary Medical Association. So it's really key that people watch out for adverse legislation. Things pop up, get added to the bills. Something sounds good till it goes through the final stage, between the House and the Senate, as you well know, and all the pork gets added on, and then all of a sudden it's not a good bill.
Right. So you're familiar with the legislature and how it works, and perhaps I don't know if you've seen a list of the Senate committees because those do change sometimes. But which committees would you choose to serve on if you could have a choice when you come into the Senate?
I would say agriculture for sure, and that's a combination of things. Also, energy, the Energy Committee, Health and Human Services, because public health, like I said, is very important. It's important to me. I've been involved with it for all my years as a veterinarian, and it's a big topic, a big issue, and things that can pop up where you need the advice of a veterinarian or somebody in public health for sure. But let's say avian influenza changes a little bit and starts to cause more illness in people. Well, you're going to need the voice of reason of veterinarians that have dealt with this in all species. When COVID came out, I spoke on that numerous times with all the TV stations. I was on Fox News 4 times, ABC, NBC, CBS, Good Morning America, talking about COVID and pets. That was the big issue back then. And, does it affect cats? And does it affect large cats? And it did affect large cats, but it wasn't going to people from cats. So there were all those issues that veterinarians have great insight into.
Yeah. Something strange about this race when I heard your name bubble up as a candidate was that you have the same name as a former Senator, John Howe, whose brother is now serving in the Senate, Jeff Howe, who was a House member that I served with. And so we have, John Howe running, we have a Gazelka running, and we have a Heinzman also in this race, which are names of all legislators in St. Paul. So confusing for people that follow politics. Especially because you have the first and last name of a former state senator. No relation, I assume.
No relation. No.
Yeah.
There was a Senator Steve Dill, who was in 6 years, I think, in the House and maybe 18 years or 16 years in the Senate. He was from Litchfield. And he was very, very effective in what he did, and he kept everybody evaluated. He served on the Ag Committee and several others, of course, but very knowledgeable on so many issues. And before him, there was Doug Carlson from Sandstone. He was a veterinarian that served a couple of 3, 4, 5 terms, and before that, there was one way back, 65 to 72. That's the only 3 veterinarians I know that have served, but they served long terms. I see now in the Senate that there's 2 MDs and a chiropractor. So I think a veterinarian would be a good addition.
Yeah. Well, it is good to have people with specific work or life experiences that can bring their passion to the legislature in advocating for changes or a deeper understanding of policy in their districts. When you're elected, you also, of course, you get this binder of every lobbyist for every industry that you can call on. Unfortunately, the lobbyists for organizations may not have the same opinion as, for instance, veterinarians in your district or nurses in your district that you call. So it's best to always circle back to the constituents in your district to get the best feel for how it impacts them. With the resorts in your district, the legislation that's come down on small business owners for paid family leave and the sick and safe time is having a serious impact on a lot of employers, especially in the hospitality industry. I assume that you would be advocating for rescinding the requirement that they have to do these sick and safe time and the paid family leave and everything for all employers.
I sure would.
It doesn't prevent employers from offering that, but it just removes the requirement that they must offer that, because not every business is the same, and not every employee wants to really. It's a tax on their wages, so not every employee wants to put that aside or have the employer take it out of their paycheck. So anything else that you want to talk about that differentiates you from other candidates in the race that you want to add?
I just think my life experience and the skill set I have from 48 years as a veterinarian and serving on state and national boards. Been involved in politics for a long time as far as the veterinary field, and I would hope that the voters could put their trust in me. I'm an elder in my church. I preach when the pastor's gone. Very strong pro-life Christian, so that's what I have to offer.
Okay. Well, John, thanks for doing the interview, and I'll share this information with all of our listeners and to people in the district as well. I think it's going to be an important decision. The race is coming up extremely fast, and I think that you have mail-in ballot districts in your Senate district, so there are people who, like me, don't have a place to vote locally, and that we have to vote by mail. And so those ballots are probably already on their way out to the district, so people are going to be voting early. But I hope your volunteers are out door knocking and calling primary voters, and hopefully you can get a few mailers out to those folks to explain to them who you are, and get them to call their friends and family and get them to vote for you.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Thank you.